Hello and welcome to another episode of our panel discussions. And this time we have a very special guest who contacted us after he saw our recent panel discussion on the Resurrection of Gavin Stone. It is Dallas Jenkins, the director of the film. Thank you for coming on. So how did you originally find our panel discussion?
One of the guys who's working on the movie, marketing the movie, I think he just came across it. So he sent it to me and said, you got to check this out. And then two other people, like the screenwriter for the film also was like, did you see this? And hey, check this out. And so because at first I thought, I don't have 15 minutes right now. I was getting ready to go to bed. And two other people texted me probably within 10 minutes. And so I said, I got to do this. And I could not. I pushed play, and it was like the best 15 minutes of my day. Because here's the thing. Here's why I loved it. You guys seemed like you were genuinely watching it in real time. I mean, that you weren't faking your reactions, obviously, so you're watching.
No. Yeah, it was real.
And so there were moments when I was really pleased that certain things came across properly, and then moments where I thought, that didn't come across right. Quick example, I think at one point he says, Jesus Christ Superstar, and you are
my name's
Renee. Your name. Yeah. You said something about how they're performing Jesus Christ Superstar.
My name is Gavin Stone. I'm auditioning for the role of Jesus Christ Superstar.
I don't want to see a WWE rom-com with Jesus Christ Superstar.
He was just actually making a joke. He was trying to be funny.
What? Really?
He says, I'm here to audition for the role of Jesus Christ. And then he says, Superstar, and he's trying to make a joke, but they don't get it, because he's like a theater guy.
Right, because he's the celebrity, like the star.
And so the point is that the joke falls flat. But you thought it meant that they were performing Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, I did. The movies we've been watching these days and that are coming out, we all have this little bit of PTSD that assumes the worst, and I'm not the only one that does it. People in their comments do it all the time. Renee, did you mean this? No, I didn't mean that.
Right. What was so funny was the genuine joy that I only usually see from wrestling fans. That when Shawn Michaels came on and when WWE came on, and it was just so fun to see just completely nerding, geeking out with it.
To serve the Lord in whatever way you see fit.
One of my favorite wrestlers is in this movie.
No.
Shawn Michaels.
Shawn Michaels gonna hit the devil with sweet chin music.
Yes! I get all these references. Okay, my inner wrestling nerd is coming out.
I love feedback, even if it's negative. Mm-hmm. You guys weren't harsh or anything like that, but it was just seeing you in real time kind of talk through it. And then there were a couple things that I was like, I got to clear that up. And so I just thought it'd be fun to chat with you about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not here to defend the movie per se, because either you like it or you don't. But I thought I'd at least could clear up, if there's some questions and explanations. I can certainly give you an explanation of why WWE is doing a faith-based movie and why Blumhouse Productions, which is known primarily for movies like Sinister and Paranormal Activity and The Conjuring, all these horror films, why they and a wrestling company are partnered with a church in the Midwest. I mean, I work at a church in Chicago.
Ned, you were absolutely curious about.
He's been waiting.
I've been so excited to talk to you about this movie.
It sounds like vice versa here.
I guess one of my first questions is, what inspired you to become a director?
Well, my father is pretty well-known author. He wrote the Left Behind series, which was...
Really? Wow. Really?
Yeah. And what's ironic about it, this is not the point of this conversation, but a very controversial series, obviously. And even there was some criticism from all different types of places. And one of them was thinking, is this an anti-Catholic book? And he was like, no, the Pope gets raptured too. The point is that the believers, his belief of the rapture of the believers go to heaven, and he's like, no, the Pope goes. I mean, there's a lot in common between Protestants and Catholics, but leaving all that aside, I got my storytelling desire from him, obviously, but I was a sports nut growing up, and I saw the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when I was in high school, and I thought, if I could arouse in people the emotions that movie aroused in me, that's what I want to do. And that pretty much in high school kind of turned me around, and I had grown up pretty strong fundamentalist church, fundamentalist background, old school Baptist. My father is kind of a Christian celebrity of sorts. We were pretty safe, protected family. But when I got into high school and they finally started watching movies with me, and I found out my dad is a big movie buff, and I just got introduced to all the great movies of all time, and from then on I was hooked. So my dad and I started our own company back in 2000 because Left Behind had done so well, and so we had kind of the means to do our own thing. And I made a feature film in 2000, and I was 25 at the time. It's called Hometown Legend. It was a high school football film set in Alabama. So I was in Los Angeles for 10 years making movies, and I did a movie 6 years ago called What If, and that did pretty well. But this church in Chicago, which is where I grew up, called me and said, why don't you move back out here and let's make movies through the church? And this is a big church. I mean, they had a huge operating budget, so they had the means to do this. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting concept. I hadn't really considered it. But I love the church. My heart had never left the church, even though the church had a really uneasy relationship with Hollywood. I thought, oh, this could combine two of my passions. And so I've been there for 6 years. And the first few years, we couldn't get a movie made. Just the script wasn't working. And so I just got so desperate. I said, well, I got to make a short film. Just to kind of exercise my filmmaking muscle. So I did a film called The Ride, which was a Christmas Eve short film that we did just for our church's Christmas Eve services. And that was where it was going to end. But then it got in the hands of Blumhouse Productions. Again, like I mentioned, known for horror films primarily. They absolutely loved it. And they said, whatever you guys are doing, we want to be part of. Hooked us up with WWE Studios. Then the three of us co-produced Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which is a script we came across. I came in and did a rewrite of it. And we loved it. It fit what we were going for, and that's where we are now. So you originally asked me how I wanted to get into directing, and I just gave you my entire life story. So
no, that's okay. I mean, I'm actually an aspiring director, and I would love to get into filmmaking and everything one day. I've actually filmed and directed 2 short films of my own, both of them horror movies. And
interesting. So you like horror films too?
Oh, I'm a huge horror
You should
buff.
see some of the other panels. He talks about it all the time.
Oh, yes.
You and my son need to talk because he's a big nerd too.
Ooh.
But in a good way. So then you probably like Scott Derrickson. Do you know who Scott Derrickson is?
I don't think I know.
So he directed Doctor Strange.
Oh.
He directed Sinister for Blumhouse.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He's my filmmaking mentor, and he's the one who connected me. Like Blumhouse had reached out to him because he's a Christian, and they had said, "Look, we're interested in this faith-based movie thing. We don't know much about it, but there's a lot of low-budget films, which is what we specialize in. Niche marketing, we specialize in that. But the movies aren't very good, so we think we could make them better. What do you think?" And he introduced them to me. And that's when I showed them The Ride, which I didn't think I would ever show a big producer a church movie I made, but they loved it. So, again, horror film director, comic book director, connected us all, and the rest is history.
That is so awesome. In what capacity is the WWE involved exactly?
Very large capacity.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Okay.
Not just the blood effects.
Wow.
Wow.
What if they just are helping with like the fake blood for the stage work and stuff?
That'd be really funny.
Okay. I thought maybe because one guy made an appearance that they put it in the credits, but you're saying it's way more than that.
No, so that's a really good question. So it was the other way around. So WWE got the script from Blumhouse, loved it. To them, see, if you know much about wrestling, which I didn't, but there used to be what's called the Attitude Era, which was when WWE was at its most aggressive. I mean, that's when it was more vulgar, it was more intense, there was more blood, and now they're in what's called the PG era, which is much more family friendly. So the interesting thing about this faith-based movie is that the main character is an outsider. The main character is a guy pretending to be a Christian. So that he can play Jesus in this passion play that this church is putting on. So there's a lot of humor, it's kind of a reverse Sister Act in some ways. It's a fish out of water story. And I think that for a non-believer or for a non-churchgoer, they can see the movie through his eyes. And so it's not, I just think for WWE, it wasn't the kind of Christian film that was intimidating or that was so niche and so on the nose and so evangelistically minded that it was too much for them. So they just really loved it. They financed the movie. They co-produced it with Blumhouse and with us. And they're also, part of the distribution with Walden Media came on board for distribution. A couple other private investors for distribution. For production, WWE's been in from moment one. Before we started producing it, they said, look, in most of our movies, in fact, all of our movies usually star one of our wrestlers. That doesn't have to happen in this movie. But if there is a part that you think might be right, that'd be cool because our wrestlers have big followings. there was a part that fit that I didn't think would require too much intense or deep acting. It was just a good, fun role. And I knew that Shawn Michaels, who's one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, probably one of the top 5 most famous wrestlers of all time, is a very serious Christian. Had a huge, kind of come to Jesus moment back in the late 90s and transformed his life. So I said, why don't you ask him? And they said, no, he'll never do it. He's a huge star, and this is a lower budget movie, and we've asked him to do movies in the past. He's always said no. And I said, you never know. This script might be different.
Right.
Yeah.
And literally the next day, they called and they said, wow, he's into it. He wants to talk to you tomorrow. So we got on the phone, and he said, this is what I was looking for. He goes, my main reason is, I don't like to do both wrestling and movies at the same time. He had recently retired, spending time with his family, but the script really resonated with him. Yeah, I think that answers the question. I mean, yeah, WWE was just, they like the movie. They're interested in expanding their branding. They love this process. I mean, they want to do a lot more. I mean, for them, as long as this movie does even reasonable business, this is the first of several that they want to do with us. And so we shot the movie at our church in Chicago. At least most of it at our church in the surrounding area, and then edited it out in LA at their offices, and it's full on. I mean, it's all systems go between this unlikely alliance.
That is so cool.
I couldn't have imagined, from the just mainstream perception of WWE that I have and tons of people have, this is incredibly shocking. I never would have imagined that they were this into it. And
they do, brand integration. So on their shows, they usually try to work something into the storylines that connect to the film. So we'll see how that works out. But they're really behind this, and obviously put money into it, putting their energy and time into it. And so what's been interesting is when the trailer came out online, I mean, it's gotten probably 10 million views on social media. Half of the comments are HBK, which is Shawn Michaels' name. And what is WWE doing? And probably 25% of it is, what are they doing with this Christian crap? And then, another 25 to 50% is people just going, this is really cool, or I'm a Christian and it's great to see them getting involved in this, or I think overall it's been very positive. And then Shawn Michaels has such a, not only just a loyal following, but just a lot of goodwill. He's just really very well liked by, even casual fans. And so that's just been shocking to me. I just had no idea of the passion that WWE fans have. So it's been a nice value add for our film.
There wasn't as much controversy in the comments section as on a lot of different Christian movie trailers, and that really shocked us. All different kinds of people were really approving of this. So.
Right, and I think a lot of it has to do with the humor. I think that's a rare thing for faith-based movies.
Yes, it is. We're going to ask about that too.
Very, very earnest. Which is, has its strengths and weaknesses. But I think that for a lot of people, there was 6 or 7 things in this trailer, as you guys exhibited on all of 6 or 7 of them, that just are not normal. So right off the bat, you see WWE.
The infamous star Gavin Stone became a fixture of parties.
WWE Studios?
And again, hearing you guys talk about it, okay, well, they're a wrestling company. Maybe they're mocking it. But then there's Walden, and Walden is usually pretty positive towards faith-based stuff. So I mean, it was the total mind blown of
the World Wrestling Entertainment is making a Christian movie. I can't even.
I thought I recognized that, but
I am flabbergasted. I am literally gadzooks, flabbergasted, boom, shakalaka, what the heck?
Our pastor is named James McDonald. He's got a very popular radio and television program in evangelical circles, but very conservative Christian. He's not in the Joel Osteen camp or that kind of thing. It's more just kind of straight line, biblically based, Midwest, typical church, which again I think is even more odd for people. Which is you wouldn't expect movies. You wouldn't usually connect that with movies, but he's just very forward thinking. And I grew up in Chicago, but then I was out in LA for 10 years, and so I moved back. People always ask me, what are you doing at a church making movies? I mean, there's just so many things. And then, again, I don't know if you recognize the BH Tilt logo, but that's the connection to Blumhouse. And so, again, it just blows people's minds. Horror film, wrestling company, Walden, humor.
It's such a weird mismatch.
Everyone's taking in a bunch of different directions at once, and they're like, "How did these come together?"
Right. So that's why I thought I got to come on your show and just if you guys would have me and just kind of clear up some of those questions, and then I think then when you watch the trailer again, it will go, oh, this makes a little bit more sense now. Oh, this guy is making a bad joke because he's trying to fit in. I mean, there's a whole scene where when he first pretends to be a Christian, and they say to him, well, because again, he gets assigned community service, so he has to do 200 hours of community service. He's assigned to clean bathrooms. Well, he sees that they're putting on this play, so he's like, oh, I'm an actor, I'm a celebrity. This would be an easy way to work off my hours. They said, well, this is one of our ministries, so that you need to be a Christian you need to have kind of a testimony to do this. And he says, oh, yeah, I'm a Christian, and then quickly looks online for how to give a Christian testimony. And so he gets up on stage and he's like, yeah, I reached the end of my rope. I had to let go and let God. I mean, he found all these kind of Christianese. Yeah, just all the Christianese that he can find online. He says, and he starts running out of phrases, so he says, he starts resorting to pop culture phrases. He's like, I had to climb that stairway to heaven and let Jesus take the wheel. And so it's just those kinds of things. That's where the humor comes from, is him trying to speak their language, combined with them being so loving and welcoming that they kind of just accept it. And the meaning, of course, comes from by playing the part of Jesus. He is forced to learn more about him. And by the time he actually performs it on stage, the lessons that he's been learning from being at this church, contrasted with what he knew from Hollywood and his upbringing, start to coalesce for him, and it starts to make sense, of course, and he's forced to deal with, okay, who Jesus is this is a different way of life that I'm used to, and then obviously the movie is about whether he wants to be in this new world, or whether he wants to go to Hollywood, which is where he grew up and what he knows better. He knows Hollywood, he knows rejection, he knows kind of empty celebrity. That's what he's comfortable with. He's uncomfortable with this kind of unconditional love and community that he gets at this church. How he navigates through all that is the thrust of the emotional part of the movie.
So I guess one of the things I was wanting to ask you is because, one of the things you mentioned is that it's different in that there's all the humor. And how do you go about, avoiding some of the controversy that I guess humor can have in a Christian film? Or how do you avoid, just stepping on people's toes, they'll be offended by jokes?
Or going too far,
I guess.
Yeah. I think that it's a fine line for sure, but I think that authenticity always comes through. So I love the church. I love Christians. I love us I love, Christians of all stripes and Catholics and Protestants and all that, because I believe that at heart there's good people and bad people, to use really crass terms, good and bad in every group. And the message of Christianity is that we're actually, none of us are really born good. We struggle and we sin, and we're, the beauty of our message is that we're forgiven and have grace. But the perception out there, and I think some of this is our fault, and some of this is the fault of some of the people who are on television claiming to be Christians, but showing extreme judgmentalism. But the main theme is to say, look, we're broken people, and we're not perfect, but we're supposed to love and forgive without condition. And so what I did when I was making some jokes in the movie and poking a little fun at some of the characters, I made sure two things. One, I made sure that there was always balance. So, for instance, I poked fun at the kind of the theology expert in the movie, who always kind of feels the need to speak up. And I see y'all looking at him. But who always kind of feels the need to, kind of insert a little theological lesson into each thing. So I poked a little fun, but also made him the nicest guy in the movie. So if I would have made him a theological expert and the most judgmental one, then that's almost, now I'm officially implying that people who care deeply about theology are also automatically judgmental, and that's not true. The guy who was the ex-con, it's played by Shawn Michaels, same thing, making him really kind-hearted and having a servant's attitude. And not pretending to be something that he's not. So once you establish a foundation that the characters that you're portraying are characters that you actually love, then, and the audience believes that, then you can get away with jokes and humor, and it doesn't feel mean. And I'm sure that I've seen people, some comments, who look at the trailer and just automatically assume, partially because maybe WWE's involved, that this is a mocking movie, this is a blasphemous movie. But I have never gotten one comment of that from anyone who's actually seen it in test screenings or in advanced showings. I mean, it's been nothing but universal. I mean, I'm sure not everyone loves the movie, but I'm saying of the vast majority of people who've given us very positive feedback, even people who didn't like the movie, no one has said anything like it's mean-spirited by any means. And I think that just comes because I love humor and I love the church, and so those two can come together. And if people aren't willing to laugh at themselves a little bit, then I wasn't intending for them to enjoy the movie anyway, and I just have to live with that. So it is a fine line. I think you do need to make sure that you're not making them look stupid. For sure, the pastor, I was very, very intent on making sure that the pastor was someone who was smart and a good person and a real human being. I think most times in movies, a pastor is either overly pious or a serial murderer. And I think that's true in Catholic films as well. I mean, I think that's even more true in Catholic films. There's usually some sort of Gothic statement being made by someone who is, has some sort of anti-Catholic perspective and thinks that all priests are secretly doing something evil. And so that, even as a Protestant, that's bothered me. I've just said, yeah, there's some bad seeds, but there's also like some of the most wonderful people in the world I've ever met are priests. So this guy's going to be in between. He's not going to be overly pious, and he's not going to be a murderer. He's going to be a human being. And so that in and of itself is something that I strive to do.
Wow, thanks for really paving the way for this kind of a attitude towards Christian characters on film.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people have struggled with this in their own films in the past. So I'm excited to see this one because you're taking it so seriously, and you know your stuff.
So genuinely, yeah.
Yeah, genuinely.
And I think the whole what's really important, especially for us being Catholic, is the aspect of we're not perfect. Because I know, like, again, being Catholic, not that, I'm not saying anything about other religions. I was saying, as Catholics, we always want to be growing closer to God and growing deeper in our faith. So, like, we want to be on the road to sainthood and to try, so that specific aspect to us is extremely important. So it's really good to, like, hear that from you. And I guess, like, my question would be, what is kind of the root lesson, without giving any spoilers, obviously, the root lesson that you kind of really want to get across to the audience, the message you want to teach, the lesson you want to preach that could help others?
I would say that there's a very important scene near the end of the film where Gavin's character is shown unconditional forgiveness, and it really rocks him. He doesn't get it. He doesn't have a box for that. And he says, why, basically? Why are you doing this? And she's struggling with it herself. She is not perfect and has struggled with loving him unconditionally. She says, this is what we do. And she walks away, and she has a smile on her face when she says it. My pastor is currently doing a sermon series that was inspired by that line. It's called This Is What We Do. And the three topics of this 3-part sermon series are: we welcome without judgment, we love without condition, and we forgive without limits. And that's the ultimate message of this movie, is that a church that is doing those three things is a church that can save the world, and is a church where you're going to have to order more chairs to get to fit all the people in. And the churches that aren't doing those things, that aren't welcoming without judgment, now that's of course not to say that you don't have standards and that you're not, trying to sanctify yourselves and you through the Lord and getting pruned and knocked on your butt.
Right, because certain judgments are good and certain judgments are bad.
Right, there's a big mix-up of what judgment is these days, but I know we're on the same page about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and so, Jesus said forgive 70 times 7, and that was not to be taken literally 490 times. It meant to be taken like many, many, many more forgiveness than you were planning on doing. And so that's the ultimate message of the movie, is that it's in some ways a bit of a love letter to the church. But to address what you said, it was very important to me that the church wasn't perfect either. And this is a key scene in the film, is he is rehearsing for the play, and he's doing the scene where the Pharisees are wanting to stone the adulterous woman. And Jesus says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Now, I know that this story in and of itself has its own controversies, but it was being portrayed in the play, and he's playing the part of Jesus. And he's asking all these questions. He's saying, first of all, why does he even defend her? Does he even know her? And what is he writing in the sand? And he says it feels so stiff and formal because he's performing it a little bit like you see Jesus in most passion plays or even in most movies, which is he speaks in these dulcet tones and he always sounds like he's quoting scripture instead of talking like a normal person. And so for Gavin, who's an actor, he's trying to get to the heart of the scene, and he's just asking these questions. And she says, well, it looks fine to me. She's the pastor's daughter, and she's directing it. And he says, what is he writing? And she says, the Bible doesn't say. He says, why not? She says, oh, it's not the point of the scene. She's taken for granted, and I think a lot of us Christians do this. We're so used to some of this stuff that we take it for granted, and we kind of get used to how it's portrayed, and maybe we miss out on some of the subtleties. And ultimately, when the scene is finally performed, there's a really key moment in the movie where he's performing it, and it hits him because he's experienced some of the grace that Jesus is giving to her, and it makes it that much more personal. And some of us Christians haven't received that kind of grace recently because we're used to hearing about the kind of grace of the person who was found drunk in the ditch and God rescued him, and all these big, powerful testimonials. And those of us who've been Christians for a while, Protestant or Catholic, sometimes we kind of go, I haven't experienced something like that in a long time. When was the last time I was truly forgiven for something big? And that's why I think in the Catholic Church, there's a lot of liturgy about that, kind of reminding yourselves that you need that. Protestants were not as good at that. But being reminded, I think, that we need grace too, and we're not perfect. And sometimes even outsiders have something to teach us, I think would be another key thing that I was trying to get across in this movie.
I know one of the things you mentioned in your original comment, the first message to us, is maybe clearing up something about the rom-com-y movie poster.
Yeah. So.
Oh yes.
Because this was another funny part. So you guys are like, analyzing the spiritual nature of it, and not a little confused. And then you said, or maybe it's rom-com-y, I don't know. And then you see the poster, and the reaction to the poster was so funny. It was like, oh no.
That is so rom-com-y.
Oh my
God.
Oh my.
You've got to be kidding. That ruins everything.
That ruins everything?
Oh, yeah, look.
One of the reasons I was laughing was because, again, I think you expected that all of the poster was meant to be earnest. We're trying to portray the earnestness of this story, and some of the poster is meant to be, I wouldn't call it kitschy, but we were kind of poking a little fun at movie posters to some extent.
It was
so
funny.
When it says
It was
the girl, the pastor, the ex-con, and the skeptic, those had a little bit of double meaning. I think Christians can go, oh yeah, there's one of those in each of our churches. Yeah, we recognize that archetype. The pastor, the good girl, the ex-con, and the skeptic. We recognize that. I think for the outsider, maybe it comes across as more playful. And to be honest, there are people who will see it as a rom-com poster, and that's okay. We were trying to do a couple different things with it, so it doesn't bother me that I think people will see it. Some people will see it as a rom-com. It was just meant to be a little bit playful. Again, I can't claim it was pure satire where I'm just like, yeah, no, we're too cool for rom-coms. We're just mocking the whole thing. If you didn't get it, that's your fault. None of that. But it's kind of in the middle. It was just like it was meant to be playful, meant to show that the movie isn't quite as earnest as your average faith-based movie.
What is your set like? What's it like working with your crew? What's the environment like making a Christian film?
Well, it's definitely different from other movies in the sense that we shot this movie in a church. Obviously, I and many of my partners are Christians, and this is an industry that there's not that many Christians in this industry. Mm-hmm. But some people ask us, well, do you only work with Christians, or do you pray at the beginning of each day on the set? And the answer to that is no. I pray personally, but I would say the majority of the crew were church outsiders. Brett Dalton, who played Gavin Stone, has not hidden the fact that he's a church outsider. He actually has a similar story to Gavin Stone. He's not a churchgoer himself. He just loved the script. For him, the script didn't even seem like a faith-based movie, which is funny because it's set in a church. But for him, it was just a funny movie about a fish out of water. So our sets, obviously I live my life out. I believe that I'm supposed to be salt and light in whatever environment that I'm in. but we don't force anyone who's a guest on my set to do anything like what I'm doing. It's just a regular movie set. Once we say action to the end of the day, we're professionals. So my quote unquote testimony or my faith comes out in just how I act in my relationships, but I don't claim to be better than anyone else. And then the relationships we build with people, obviously I don't hide the fact that I'm a Christian by any means, but our set, I think I'd like to say our sets are as professional as anybody else's, maybe a little bit more kind, maybe a little bit more gentle, maybe a little less vulgar. People tend to be a little bit, they tend to kind of watch their language a little bit when they're in a church, which is fine, but I don't force that on them. I mean, we say come as you are. So it's like any other set, except the content that's being filmed is obviously very different from the average film Blumhouse normally would do, or the average film WWE Studios would normally do. So that in and of itself causes people to ask questions.
I really did enjoy all the production blogs you did, that the little videos that you posted on Vertical Church Films. They were very, very authentic. Yeah, the feel of just someone going around the set and filming instead of like the too polished. It felt informal. It felt authentic. Like I was seeing you on set.
I think at the end of the day, and that's one of the things I liked about your video as well, is that again, it was in real time. You guys were reacting in real time. I think that's just so much more interesting. I think that authenticity is kind of the currency of today's relationships.
Yes.
My pastor actually says authenticity breeds community and intimacy. And I think people want connection. I think even a couple times I said in my production blog, today sucked. Today was a really difficult day.
Hey, so day 3 is wrapping up, and boy, it was a tough one, but we made it.
I just feel like even if I'm not smooth and polished when I'm talking for a minute and a half at the end of the workday of my day of shooting, and my hair is messed up, that would be more interesting to me as a viewer. And when I watch other blogs, than again, like you said, the slick, polished version of it. So I just feel like that's more interesting. Yeah, those are more for, I think, people who are more interested in kind of behind the scenes of how films are made. But
yeah.
So when you finish this movie, I'm thinking there might be a different feel to it than when another director finishes a regular movie. Like this is a life work to you, but then it's also for that inspiring message you talked about earlier. So I bet it was a fantastic moment for you to see it all together in one piece.
Honestly, I will be much more excited on Monday morning after opening weekend.
I'm sure.
People actually bought tickets.
Okay.
I love conversations like this. I really do. And we've had screenings. We did a test screening months and months ago for Strangers. Every movie does a test screening, and it was the highest testing movie Blumhouse has ever had, and it was one of the top 2 or 3 highest testing movies WWE has ever had for non-Christians and Christians. Those kinds of things are very heartwarming and satisfying. I just came from a test screening in Indiana yesterday, and the reaction has been fantastic. And so if that's where it ended and the people who've seen it so far were moved and impacted by it, that's great. And my calling is higher than financial, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if the movie doesn't succeed, we can't make too many more of these. So obviously I want it to resonate with people. So I really don't get excited until the movie is out and has had some measure of success in some way. I guess I'm just wired that way. I'm a little cynical by nature. I'm a little bit of a worst case scenario, prepare for kind of guy. I've had enough moments where you watch a movie and someone comes up to you afterwards and they say, "Congratulations." And you think that's a good thing. And then you realize, no, congratulations means they didn't want to say anything positive, so they just congratulate you on making it. So I'm learning to just temper my enthusiasm for people's reactions. But this one for sure has had as good a reaction by far of anything that I've done in my 15 years. So all systems seem to be moving well. But, again, you guys, we've had a great conversation, and now you get the trailer a little bit better and it's more funny and stuff. Yeah. But you may not like it. It may not be your kind of film. So I can't predict that. I'm sorry. I'm so bad with names, but my wrestling buddy.
My name's Ned.
But I'm confident Ned's gonna like it.
Oh yeah. I'm very confident. I'm probably gonna love this movie.
Yeah, but I can't. Everyone has different tastes, so I'm not. That's what I wanted to make sure of too. I'm not expecting you guys. You don't have to say nice things, and if you end up watching the movie, which I think you will, and then do a review of it afterward, you don't have to be honest. I would want that. And if you have something critical about the movie, by all means, I enjoy that too. But like I said, there's no promises that people are going to show up on opening weekend and watch it and love it. So at the end of the day, it is up to God. It's as to what the movie, all I can do is my job and listen to what I believe the Lord told me to do. And at the end of the day, it's up to Him as to the results.
All right. Wow. There's so much anticipation for this movie, even just from this table right in front of you. So we look forward to seeing it.
If we sell 4 tickets from this table, that'll at least be a good start. So.
Oh yes.
Oh no, but your social media manager sent us a private screener, so we don't have to buy tickets. Oh, but maybe we should go opening weekend.
I'm telling you what, my girlfriend and I, we are so interested in seeing this movie. I'm going to take her out on a date to go see this movie. So you're definitely going to at least get those tickets from us.
Yeah, we'll go see it. We'll come back and be honest about it. And yeah, this is a really great moment for our channel to have you come on like this.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Let's do it again. Maybe sometime late January after the movie's been out.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I mean, hey, regardless of what the movie is, if we can stay friends, that would be awesome. Honestly,
I think it'd be cool also if one or two of you don't like it and the other two do or whatever. Let's come on and just say, here's why I didn't like it.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
What were you thinking when you did this? And I'd love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no worries about that.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to go run and pick up my son.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless.
Yeah, God bless. Blessings. Peace be to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did it.
That was so cool.
Well, I'm really happy there's no Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah. See, now
that was your big thing with it, and it was just a joke all along.
I know that my PTSD came out. I usually get on other people's case for having the PTSD on my own channel. I'm like, calm down, but here I am going like, what? And leaving set, like screaming in the background, like guilty as charged. Oh gosh, thank you for watching New Catholic Generation. We'll be back again with more content. Thank you.